global health. And tomorrow, we're not wasting any time, Dr. Fauci will participate remotely in the meeting of the World Health Organization as the U.S. head of delegation. President Biden also officially appointed a COVID-19 response coordinator, a position and team we had already previously announced, but made it official today, to create a unified national response to the pandemic. And he reestablished the national security team responsible for global health, security, and biodefense. The COVID-19 pandemic has triggered an almost unprecedented housing affordability crisis. He took immediate action to confront the crisis and asked relevant agencies to extend nationwide moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures. The pandemic has also increased the hardship on millions of Americans who owe federal student loans. In response, the president asked the Department of Education to extend the pause on student loan payments and interest. He rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, putting the United States back in a position to exercise global leadership and advancing the objectives of the ambitious agreement. Sorry, hope you're comfortable. There's a few more. And a second broad executive order will roll back harmful regulatory reversals made by the previous administration to protect public health and the environment. This order protects our nation's treasures by reviewing the boundaries for several national monuments, places a temporary moratorium on all oil and natural gas leasing in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and reestablishes the interagency working group on the social cost of greenhouse gases. He also launched a whole-of-government effort to advance racial equity and root out systemic racism from federal programs and institutions. He directed the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Attorney General, to take all appropriate actions to preserve and fortify DACA, which provides temporary relief from deportation to Dreamers, young people who were brought to this country as children. The president also put an end to the Muslim ban, a policy rooted in religious animus and xenophobia. He signed a proclamation effective immediately, halting further funding or construction of the previous administration's border wall and terminating the so-called national emergency used to wastefully divert billions for wall construction. Also today, President Biden sent an immigration bill to Congress. The U.S. Citizenship Act modernizes our immigration system. It provides hardworking people who've enriched our communities and lived here for decades an opportunity to earn citizenship. The president's priority reflected in the bill are to responsibly manage the border, keep families together, grow our economy, address the root causes of migration from Central America, and ensure that America can remain a refuge for those fleeing prosecution. With that, I'd love to take your questions. Zeke, why don't you kick us off?
First off, congratulations. And one question about your role, you touched on this a little bit at the top, but when you were up there, do you see yourself, your primary role is promoting the interests of the president, or are you there to provide us the unvarnished truth so that we can share that with the American people?
Well, let me first say, Zeke, that I come to this podium having served both in the White House and at the State Department as the spokesperson there. And I traveled the world on trips to promote democracy, where I saw the power of the United States and, of course, the power of this podium and the power of truth and the importance of setting an example of engagement and transparency. So I will just state, because you gave me the opportunity, I have deep respect for the role of a free and independent press in our democracy and for the role all of you play. As I noted earlier, there will be moments when we disagree, and there will certainly be days where we disagree for extensive parts of the briefing, even perhaps. But we have a common goal, which is sharing accurate information with the American people. If the president were standing here with me today, he would say he works for the American people. I work for him, so I also work for the American people. But his objective and his commitment is to bring transparency and truth back to government, to share the truth even when it's hard to hear. And that's something that I hope to deliver on in this role as well.
And then just one substantive one, so we're short on time. When will President Biden begin making some foreign leader calls? Who's on that initial list? And during the transition, he didn't speak with President Putin. Does he plan on doing that? And is he going to discuss retaliation for the SolarWinds hack on the federal government?
Sure. Sure. Let me try to get to those. And I'll just note, since Zeke mentioned it, I know some of you have to get to another event this evening because we're not fully done with the day. So we will have longer briefings in the future, but we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So his first foreign leader call will be on Friday with Prime Minister Trudeau. I expect they will certainly discuss the important relationship with Canada, as well as his decision on the Keystone Pipeline that we announced today. I don't have any plans to read out for you in terms of a call with President Putin. I will note for you that I would expect his early calls will be with partners and allies. He feels it's important to rebuild those relationships and to address the challenges and threats we're facing in the world. On solar winds, we've spoken about this previously a bit prior to his inauguration, I should say, today. We are, of course, we reserve the right to respond at a time and a manner of our choosing to any cyber attack. But our team is, of course, just getting on the ground today. They're just getting onto their computers, so I don't have anything to read out for you or to preview for you at this point in time. Peter, go ahead.
Jeff, I have a question for you on policy. First, a quick housekeeping question. A short time ago, President Biden said that he received a very generous letter from President Trump. Of course, he said it was private. He said, I will not talk about it until I talk to him. Is President Biden planning to call now former President Trump? And is this White House working in a way to try to put the two in touch?
Well, I think, Peter, that was a reflection of President Biden's view, and I was with him when he was reading the letter in the Oval Office right before he signed the executive actions, was that this is a letter that was private, as he said to you all. It was both generous and gracious, and it was just a reflection of him not planning to release the letter unilaterally, but I wouldn't take it as an indication of a pending call with the former president.
Let me ask you on policy, if I can, quickly. You talked, obviously, your role is sort of in terms of delivering the best information to the American people on behalf of this White House. The battle for truth may be as tough a fight right now as is the battle against coronavirus. How do you and President Biden plan to combat disinformation that in many ways led to that assault we witnessed 2 weeks ago today on the Capitol?
Well, I think, Peter, there are a number of ways to combat misinformation. One of them is accurate information and truth and data and sharing information even when it is hard to hear and even when it is not meeting the expectations of people at home who are desperate for this crisis to be over. We'll have more to share with you in the next few days, hopefully before the weekend. But what we plan to do is not just return these daily briefings Monday through Friday, not Saturdays and Sundays. I'm not a monster, but also to return briefings with our health officials and public health officials. We want to do those regularly in a dependable way, with data shared with all of you and with the public, so that they can also track progress we're making on getting the pandemic under control.
As it relates to the cabinet, if I can quickly, we know President Biden's beginning without a single member of his cabinet confirmed. What is your understanding on how quickly those confirmations will happen, and when should we expect additional nominations and ambassadorships to be announced?
Well, Peter, the desire to get his cabinet in place and get his team confirmed is front and center for the president. It is an issue, a topic he discussed with members of Congress from both the Republican and Democratic Party today during the course of the day and the course of events. I think as we were coming out here, Avril Haines should be on her way to confirmation. I don't know if it's officially happened yet, but she's on her way. We have prioritized getting our national security team in place, given the crisis we're facing, given the importance of keeping the American people safe at this time. But we are eager for those to move forward quickly in the coming days. Ideally tomorrow, by Friday, we'd like to move them quickly. It's something that he is raising in his conversations, as we all are with members of Congress and their teams.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen.
Jen, has President Biden invited congressional leaders to sit down and talk about the COVID relief measure that he introduced?
Well, he has been discussing the COVID relief measures, the entire package that has, as you know, unemployment insurance. It has relief and assistance for the American people. It also has money to reopen schools, which I know as a mother impacts all of us. But he has been discussing that with Democrats and Republicans since long before he was sworn in today. Today was a day where he had conversations about working together in terms of getting his team in place, on his agenda moving forward. But I expect he will be picking up the phone in the coming days and having more of those conversations. In terms of when he will meet in person, I will say soon, and we hope to have more of an update on that for you soon as well.
Do you expect him to play in those negotiations? There was a lot of comments today about his familiarity with the Senate. How involved will he be in that process?
He will be quite involved. There is the issue that he wakes up every day focused on is getting the pandemic under control. The issue he goes to bed every night focused on is getting the pandemic under control. This package is a pivotal step to doing that. And it has assistance for the American people to make that bridge financially. It also has essential funding for vaccine distribution. He will be very involved. He will not be the only one. We have a whole team here of senior staff, of course, but as you noted, he is not a stranger to the Senate. He served there for 36 years. Many of these people, many of the members on both sides of the aisle he served with over that time, and I expect he will be quite involved in the process. Go ahead, Jen.
So on this COVID relief package, Senator Romney was already saying to reporters today that he doesn't see a need for another virus relief package, and he's the kind of Republican vote you're likely going to be trying to get. So how long are you willing to try to work to get Republican support before you decide to go through the budget reconciliation process instead?
Well, as you know, because you all cover it, and as I've stated a couple times here today, we are in the middle of an urgent crisis in this country. It's not just impacting Democrats, it's impacting Republicans, it's impacting red states and blue states, and this plan is intended to address the suffering of the American people. So we hope, and frankly, we expect Republicans in Congress and Democrats too will support assistance that will bring relief to the people they represent. This is a conversation. He, of course, gave a primetime address, as you all know, last week. It seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't, to announce his specifics. And he has already had a number of conversations with Democrats and the Republicans. Those will continue. His clear preference is to move forward with a bipartisan bill. There's no question about it. But we are also not going to take any tools off the table for how the House and Senate can get this urgent package done. So we are only less than a day has he been president of the United States, but he is going to continue to work with members of both parties to get it done. Francesca, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I do have a question about reopening schools, but I just want to pick up where she left off on that and note that Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, who's expected to be the Senate Budget Committee ranking member, have already said that the price tag on the president's proposal is too high for them. So is there any wiggle room on that number, and has he already begun negotiations with Mitch McConnell?
Well, first, the package wasn't designed with the number 1.9 trillion as a starting point. It was designed with the components that were necessary to give people the relief they needed. So what's challenging is, what are you going to cut? Are you going to cut funding for vaccinations? Are you going to cut funding for unemployment insurance? Are you going to cut funding for reopening schools? But it was laid out as his proposal based on recommendations from economists, recommendations from health experts, and as you've also seen, there have been also an outpouring of support from everyone from Bernie Sanders to the Chamber of Commerce for the package and the components in it. But this is a discussion, it's a conversation, and he is no stranger to the process of bill making. So we're at the beginning of the process, and as we continue, there'll be conversations with members of both parties of what will be in a final package. And rarely does it look exactly like the initial package that is proposed.
With regards to reopening schools, what level of vaccination in teachers or students or level of testing does the administration think would be appropriate in order to meet the target date that the president has set?
This is a great question, and as I noted at the beginning, and as a mom myself, I want to know all the details as well. We're going to have more to share from our health experts in the coming days, and I will venture to get them in here to give you all a briefing on the specifics, but we really want to lean into them on their expertise on that front. Go ahead. I'll come right to you right next. Go ahead.
President Biden promised to end all new oil and gas leasing on federal lands when he was a candidate. the order that you just mentioned that he signed today was much narrower than that. It's a temporary moratorium, and it only applies to ANWR. And there's some debate about whether he has the legal flexibility to even follow through with his full promise. Does the administration still have that commitment today to
We
end
do,
that?
and the leases will be reviewed by our team. We just have only been in office for less than a day now, and I will just, since you gave me the opportunity, just also confirm for all of you, all of our executive actions that we released today were reviewed by the career staff at the OLC. We went through that process in advance of releasing them. That took a great deal of work from our policy teams, but that was a vital part of the process for us as well.
And could you talk a little bit just about the kind of the preparations for getting the White House ready and safe for the new president? It's been reported that you did $500,000 worth of deep cleaning. Could you talk about the measures that you took to ensure that the president is safe?
Well, I would refer you to the General Services Administration, who oversees any steps like that. What I can speak to, if it's of interest, of the steps we're all taking to make sure that we are safe, he is safe, you are all safe. Those include daily testing when we're in the White House. It includes wearing N95 masks. I wore it out, of course, here today, and will continue to do that. It includes stringent rules about social distancing and abiding by that in the building. That keeps us safe, but the president has asked us to also be models to the American people, and that's vitally important to us as well. So there are a number of new COVID steps, precautions that we've put in place as of today. Go ahead all the way in the back.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for doing this in a daily basis again. So climate change being one of the priorities, how does President Biden plan to work with Brazil? During the campaign, Biden criticized Brazil on deforestation, and then the Brazilian president criticized Biden back, and he was the last one to congratulate President Biden on his election. What is the expectation for their relationship, and does he plan to speak with the Brazilian president?
Well, I don't have anything to predict for you or advance for you in terms of a call or conversation. What I can convey on climate change, of course, and addressing the climate crisis, it's one of the 4 crises that he's identified will impact his administration, is impacting not just the American people, but the global community, is that rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement is a vital step toward doing that. The United States was one of the only countries in the world, as you all know, that has not had a seat at the table in the last few years. A little technical step there is we have submitted that to the UN Secretary General, and it will take approximately 30 days for that to take place. But I use that as an example because that's one step, but we also know that we need to be models here at home as we are addressing an issue like this. The United States continues to be one of the world's largest emitters of greenhouse gases, and we need to put in place policies and take steps here to address that as well. But I'm sure we'll have more to discuss on Brazil in the coming months. Go ahead right there.
What are the next steps when it comes to Iran, and does the president have any plans to rejoin the nuclear deal?
Well, the president has made clear that he believes that through follow-on diplomacy, the United States should seek to lengthen and strengthen nuclear constraints on Iran and address other issues of concern. Iran must resume compliance with significant nuclear constraints under the deal in order for that to proceed. I will say that, as I noted a little bit earlier, we would expect that some of his earlier conversations with foreign counterparts or foreign leaders will be with partners and allies, and that we would certainly anticipate that this would be part of the discussion.
And then could you just give us some color about what it was like for him going into the Oval Office? He's been waiting for this for so long. What was his reaction?
Well, I spent a little time with him earlier, and he had an incredible sense of calm, and a sense of some joy. Of course, he spent the day with his family and his grandchildren and his children, and that always has an impact, I think. He also said he felt like he was coming home. Remember, he spent 8 years here as the vice president, playing an important role as a partner to President Obama. And, that was the emotion that overtook him today. He's also eager to get to work. He was asking questions about policy and COVID and what's next. And so that also reflects his desire to roll up his sleeves and get going. Let's see. I'm sorry. I told you I was going to ask you. I just skipped over you. Go ahead.
Right. I'll take it now. So President Biden wants a theme of his presidency to be unifying the country. Does he think that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer should drop a potentially divisive Senate impeachment trial?
Well, he spoke today, as you all saw, about unity in his inaugural address and the importance of unity in bringing the country together and the resolve of the American people in helping to get through this moment. We are confident, though, that just like the American people can, the Senate can also multitask, and they can do their constitutional duty while continuing to conduct the business of the American people. And his view is that the way to bring the country together is to address the problems we're facing. And so that means getting this COVID relief package through, having Democrats and Republicans take a serious look at that and have conversations with each other about how to move it forward. And he's going to leave the mechanics, the timing, and the specifics of how Congress moves forward on impeachment to them.
And a quick follow-up. On President Trump's inauguration day, he filed paperwork to run for re-election, same day. Does President Biden have any plans to do that today, late, or in the coming days?
I will say, having talked to him today, his focus is not on politics. It is on getting to work and solving the problems of the American people. And as he noted on the campaign, he will wait until sometime into his first term to speak more about his political plans moving forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. The president pledged today to repair alliances. Has he planned his first foreign trip yet?
Wow, we're only 7 hours in here. You're ready for the foreign trip. I'm ready too. I don't have any details on a foreign trip to lay out for you at this point in time. Hopefully we will at some point in time. Go ahead all the way in the back.
Yeah, hi, congratulations on your new position. Owen Jensen with EWTN Global Catholic Network. Two big concerns for pro-life Americans. The Hyde Amendment, which of course keeps taxpayer dollars, as you know, from paying for abortions, Medicaid abortions, and the Mexico City policy, which under the previous administration they expanded to keep tax dollars from overseas paying for abortions. So what is President Biden planning on doing on those two items right now?
Well, I think we'll have more to say on the Mexico City policy in the coming days. But I will just take the opportunity to remind all of you that he is a devout Catholic and somebody who attends church regularly. He started his day attending church with his family this morning. But I don't have anything more for you on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, as president-elect, he talked about the possibilities of using the Defense Production Act to ramp up the production of vaccines. Having looked at more data, does he still feel that's necessary? Was that included, for example, in anything that he signed today?
We'll stay tuned. We'll do this again tomorrow, and there may be more specifics to share on plans on COVID tomorrow. I expect there will be, including more details on the Defense Production Act. He absolutely remains committed to invoking the Defense Production Act in order to get the supply and the materials needed to get the vaccine out to Americans across the country, and remains committed to his goal of getting 100 million shots in the arms of Americans in the first 100 days. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. The president talked movingly about unity today. And I've heard from people who say, well, that's just talk. They want to know what action they're going to see to show that kind of unity. Peter mentioned impeachment. Right. Can you tell us what kind of action we can expect to see?
Jen Psaki, the new White House press secretary, taking questions in her first briefing of this, as she pointed out, about 7-hour-old administration. Let's bring in Chief White House Correspondent Kristen Welker. Kristen, Jen went down a very, very long list of things that the president has signed or ordered. Obviously, they had the benefit of time before today, but still extraordinary.
It is, and she wanted to make it clear, Lester, that this is an incoming president who is not wasting any time getting to work. And just to reiterate some of the highlights, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, of course, issuing that mask mandate for federal property, and reversing former President Trump's ban on travel from Muslim-majority countries. What really stood out to me, Lester, is the fact that she started her briefing talking about the need for truth and transparency. That was yet another move aimed at an attempt at a reset here, because, of course, as we were talking about before this briefing began, so many of those briefings during the Trump administration did include statements that were not accurate or misleading or demonstrably false. And so she is trying to make the point that this is going to be a different administration and that they are going to approach these press briefings quite differently. Peter asked her, I thought, what was a very interesting question, which is, are there plans for President Biden to speak to his predecessor? He signaled that there may be when he talked about that note that former President Trump had left for him. Of course, not giving any details about what was in that note, but he did signal that perhaps there could be a conversation. And Jen indicated that there are no plans at this point for that. I was also struck by the extent to which so many of these early questions dealt with policy, dealt with how, in fact, they are going to carry out their agenda moving forward, including on immigration. How does Biden plan to get that $19 trillion COVID relief package passed? Has he invited lawmakers to the White House? Jen Psaki indicated that those sorts of meetings have not been planned yet, but are certainly on the horizon. And then you just heard that question about the impeachment, which was a significant one, because, of course, President Biden in his inaugural address called for unity. So you heard the reporter there asking, well, if he wants to see unity, is the impeachment trial inconsistent with that? And Jen Psaki essentially said that, look, the Senate can walk and chew gum at the same time. It is their belief that they're not going to weigh in on the specifics of it, but they do expect the Senate to move in short order through that impeachment trial, which will undoubtedly complicate Biden's ability to move forward with his agenda. So a packed briefing on this first night of the Biden administration.
All right,
Lester?
Kristen Welker, thanks. Yeah, busy day and more to come. We're going to return now to our regular programming. I'm Lester Holt. I'll be back on the air with Savannah Guthrie and our team at 8 Eastern time to look back at this remarkable day and to look ahead to what's next. We'll see you then.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Morris. You have been watching coverage of the first Biden White House press briefing on NBC News. Now we're going to listen back in. It's still going on.
As you noted, there's an ongoing investigation, which we certainly support. I'm not sure that he has received an update today on anything about the investigation, but we certainly support those ongoing, and we will, I'm sure, be receiving updates in the days ahead.
Does he have confidence in the FBI director?
I think I have not spoken with him about specifically FBI Director Wray in recent days, Peter, but I'll circle back with you if there's more to convey.
Janet, the president did not mention the word Trump in his inaugural address today. What was the intention behind not making any direct reference to his predecessor in that speech?
Well, I think the intention was to make the speech not about any individual elected official, any current president, former president, but make it about the American people and the moment we're facing in history right now, the struggles that millions of Americans are facing who don't have jobs, the fear people have about the health of their grandparents and their cousins and their brothers, and to make it more about the strength of the American people when they come together and not about any individual. But as you saw in his speech, it was forward-looking. It was not meant to look back on the past. Go ahead.
How does President Biden plan to recover the United States image around the world, and what is his priority globally?
Well, his priority is first rebuilding our partnerships and alliances around the world and regaining America's seat at the global table. And you can see that is evidenced in his rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, rejoining the World Health Organization, his plans to engage with partners and allies and work together to address many of the threats and issues we're facing around the world. But I think that is what you will see as his focus in the weeks ahead.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, everyone. Let's do this again tomorrow.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Morris. You are watching continuing special coverage on NBC News Now as President Joe Biden gets to work, the 46th president of the United States. With me as we follow this historic day, Washington Post political reporter Eugene Scott and also Barbara Perry, Director of Presidential Studies at the University of Virginia's Miller Center. Eugene, I'm going to start with you because we just heard the first press briefing from this new administration. Hostility towards the press was quite frankly a defining feature of the Trump presidency. Your thoughts on the first briefing we just saw from the Biden administration?
It certainly was a defining feature of the Trump presidency. And if you remember correctly, the first press meeting of the Trump administration involved then Press Secretary Sean Spicer criticizing the media for their coverage of the inauguration. But what we just saw here is Jen making it very clear to reporters that she wanted to cooperate with them and to educate Americans and inform them of the policies that will be impacting them most severely. And it was quite telling to see them launch into conversations about the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that, as we have seen and has been reported here, just a few days ago, just crossed the 400,000 deaths number. This is something that is really still continuing to affect so many Americans, and it's not winding down in the ways that we would have hoped right now. And the media is going to be pressing the Biden administration on that for days to come, if not months, in part because that is something that the president campaigned on being able to wrap his arms around.
Barbara, in his inaugural address, President Biden talked about the importance of truth. I'd like to play that.
In which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this.
Barbara, especially given the riots at the Capitol and the role that misinformation played there, what do you make of Joe Biden's tone here, and how does it compare to past inaugural addresses, if it does at all?
Well, on that point alone, we've not really ever had a time in our country where we had to have the president speak for truth. And yes, it is the case that politicians prevaricate or they spin. But even Richard Nixon, who was known to tell many a lie, didn't lie every time he opened his mouth. And the people who followed him were following him because they were conservatives, not because they saw a completely different parallel universe to liberals or Democrats. And that's what we face today. So I think that's why the president, now that our new president, spoke about that specifically in the inaugural address. And that why the beginning of this press briefing was about transparency and truth. But it also made me think of Justice Black in 1971 writing for the Pentagon Papers case at the Supreme Court to say that the founding fathers wanted the press to serve the governed, not the government. And so I thought Jen's approach tonight was to say, I'm here to inform you and to give you facts. Sometimes we'll disagree because she knows that sometimes she will have to spin, but we hope she won't prevaricate. And it just was so refreshing to see, just how proficient she was at that job.
Eugene, as Barbara mentioned, all administrations spin to some extent, and as journalists, we do our very best to always call it when it happens. But what do you expect this administration's relationship will be like with the press? We certainly got a taste of it just a short time ago.
Well, I think one thing that will distinguish this administration from the previous one is that you're seeing a lot of veterans in the communication shop, people who actually know what it's like to work with the national and even local media. And so expectations of coverage will not be warped by inexperience or just the administration's relationship with the partisan media. As you saw in the press conference, Jen took a few questions from some conservative journalists who were concerned about issues related to abortion and issues related to the impeachment and what message that could send Trump supporters. And quite frankly, the defensiveness that we were used to hearing from some of the previous press secretaries is not what we got today. And so I think that is some indicator of what we can see happening moving forward in this administration. And if it isn't, you can trust that it'll be called out on just like it was previously.
Barbara, I want to ask you another question about the inaugural address. President Biden vowing today to defeat white supremacy, promising to heal this nation. Looking back, what presidents have been in a similar, or if not similar, a comparable position in terms of difficulty, in terms of needing to unify a divided nation? And what lessons can Joe Biden take from them as he tries to heal our country?
Well, the worst example, of course, goes back to 1861. Talk about white supremacy. You had an entire group of states, totaling 11 eventually, seceding from the Union between the election of Abraham Lincoln and his inauguration in March of 1861. And so he talked about us being friends and not enemies, and the mystic cords of memory that tie us together as Americans. But it didn't work, and you had this Confederate States of America becoming their own country and perpetrating a civil war. So the lessons to be learned, I thought the mystic cords of memory were actually being woven into Joe Biden's inaugural address. I'm not saying it actually rhetorically came up perhaps to the level of a Lincoln or an FDR or Kennedy, but I certainly would say that it takes us back to that time. I can't think of another time when we were as divided as we are now, and particularly because of issues of race and violence and white supremacy as we were in the 1860s.
It's incredible to draw a comparison that far back, but that is where we are at this moment. Barbara, Eugene, thank you so much for being with us on such an important day. And back with me tonight, my anchor buddy, NBC News senior political editor, Mark Murray. Mark, so great to have you with us. I just want to get your take on that press briefing we just saw, talking about bringing truth and transparency back. Jen Psaki talking about rebuilding trust and that being central to the focus of the press office. Very different from what we've heard over the last 4 years. Your initial reaction?
Yeah, as was mentioned, from the very first Trump press briefing on the crowd size to later Kellyanne Conway talking about alternative facts, this was different. And I thought Barbara put it really well. There's a difference between total prevarication and spin. And at the end of the day, from this Biden administration, as well as what we ended up getting from the Obama administration and previous Republican administrations, there's going to be spin. That's their job. It's our job as journalists like Peter Alexander at that briefing to be able to hold the administration and power accountable, hold their feet to the fire, but basically trying to at least operate from the same set of facts, that the sky is blue, that the earth does rotate on its axis. It's helpful to basically drill down on the most important issues of the day, but when you're hearing that the sky is red, and maybe gravity doesn't exist, and maybe the earth is actually flat, and getting those pronouncements from the White House or their equivalent makes it really dizzying for reporters and journalists like us, but also for the American public, because we're not operating on the same set of facts. And so when we talk about trying to get rid of disinformation, one way to start is actually everybody in this universe operating on the same set of facts, and then getting to your opinions and your spin from there.
Mark, another interesting point I thought that Jen Psaki made, saying that, look, we will disagree, but we have a common goal of sharing accurate information with the American people. We work for the American people.
Yeah, and again, there is that is part of being a public servant. You are not a servant of the President of the United States, although you do work for the President. You serve at his or her pleasure, but at the end of the day, you work for the people. And that kind of relationship is important for any press secretary or press aide to be able to have. The other side of things is that you actually need the respect from the press, and having someone who goes up to that podium and can speak for the President of the United States instead of actually only one person being able to speak for the president, and that is the president, I do think is going to be a marked departure. And again, Allison, this isn't kind of like unique when it comes to this incoming Biden administration. You know, I've been covering Washington politics since the George W. Bush administration, the very end of the Clinton administration, the Obama era. What ended up transpiring over the last 4 years was something completely different than that, particularly when it comes to the press and its relations with an administration. And it does seem that we're getting back to what existed in the 4 years before the Trump era.
Yeah, Mark, you watched that today, and I think a lot of us watched and thought, oh, yeah, that's what this is typically like, at least if you go back 4 years or more. This is a unique for our country at this moment in time. But as you mentioned, kind of how press briefings have gone for years until the Trump administration.
Yeah, and it's, again, you might have me back on 3 months from now, 3 years from now, and we might be talking about, well, boy, Jen Psaki put her foot in her mouth when saying X, Y, and Z. That actually happened. But I do think that, that there will be controversies, there will be gaffes, there will be kind of scandals that we'll end up covering, but not to the level and to what we were talking about on operating on not facts, but just disinformation, that I had the greatest inauguration size ever, that I somehow won an election that I didn't win. Right. When we're not on that kind of level, it is really hard for us as journalists to do our job, and it's hard for the public to get the information that they need.
Yeah, a lot of smiles today, a bit of lightheartedness, of course, news as well. But as you mentioned, this is just day one, and we will certainly look to see what happens in the days ahead. But off to a good start, that's for sure. Mark Murray, I can't thank you enough for being here throughout the evening. It has been so much fun to have you as my anchor buddy.
Well, thank you. I've been happy to be your Rob. I've been Robin to your Batman.
The honor is mine, sir. Thank you.
Bye.
At today's inauguration, Oscar and Grammy winner Lady Gaga hit all the right notes singing the national anthem. Here she is.
Ladies and gentlemen, here for the singing of our national anthem, accompanied by the President's own United States Marine Band, please welcome Lady Gaga.
you ready?
Monday boost?
Are you ready for a boost?
How do you feel about that book?
We love those nurses. That was beautiful.
All month long, let's start today.
Let's go 2021.
Kicking off the new year strong. It's time to take care of you with healthy foods, fitness,
You're incredible.
and how to jumpstart your love life.
Cupid is winning.
So join us and start today.
Make no mistake, what happened that day was an insurrection against the United States government. Is this the beginning of something or the end of something? Should Donald Trump be ostracized from the Republican Party as you know it?
If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.